Hello, everybody. Welcome once again to Eternally Bored. As you can tell, we actually have a guest this podcast, our good friend and constant game player and cohort, Keith Turkowski.
How's it going?
Yeah, that's the sound of one hand clapping. Anyways, I'm Charles Washington, and of course, we have Trey Chambers here again.
Welcome. I'm Trey Chambers. I'm the host, turn to the board. I'm an English teacher, board game designer, and Keith is a game designer as well. Keith, why don't you share a little bit about your background?
I guess I've been doing video game development for, over a decade.
Don't give me your true age, man.
Yeah, but I started working at Sony Online Entertainment on EverQuest, and then I was a designer there, and then I did a couple different games there, and then I moved to Sugarland, where I was lead designer at Timegate, and now I'm a lead programmer at Lazy 8 Studios, which is a small independent video game company.
Very awesome. As someone who spent way too much time in EverQuest, I both love and hate your work.
Thanks.
Every time I think about EverQuest, I touch my nose, but
Yeah.
just for its other slanger nicknames, I guess we shouldn't have that in there, but we'll cut that out.
All right. So today on Eternally Bored, we're discussing whether or not gamers should proselytize for the hobby and bring new gamers in. This is a surprisingly controversial topic on BGG, which is Board Game Geek. For those of you who don't know, it's basically the premier board game website. And this is a debate that often crops up. So we're going to have a discussion about that. And then we're each going to give a list of our top 3 gateway games. So games basically that get gamers into the hobby. And then finally, we'll end the episode with an in-depth discussion of Terraforming Mars, which is a game we all have a lot of experience with here on the show. And we all have strong opinions about it. But before we get to that, let's have our discussion, our topic du jour, as it were, which is it good to proselytize for the hobby? And I think the way we'll break it down is we'll have a discussion of the pros and a discussion of the cons, and then we can kind of each give our final thoughts once we, have discussed all of those in depth. So
Right.
Let's start with arguments for. Do you want to...
Well, I guess we should give a little bit of background about what we do. Trey, of course, he has a weekly game night, which is more along the lines of bringing people into his house, sort of like finding people out there who might be of similar interests and letting them invite friends. And so he basically hosts a home-based weekly game event. Me and Keith, on the other hand, we're more involved on the public end. We're on meetup.com. We host one of the larger game groups, averaging about 30 to 45 people inside of Houston proper. And we have a massively changing rotation. And since it's a public group, we have a lot of people who are showing up on at a regular basis that are new. And we meet twice a week. So.
Right. And... so kind of different experiences. I'm more, after they take that first step, I can help get them involved in a smaller group, more intimate setting, maybe form some actual friendships out of it. And Charles goes to the public meetups and, reels them in and gets the fresh blood into the hobby. So kind of different experiences, but they're both, I think, crucial to as far as growing the hobby goes. So let's talk about the first point. So the first pro, I would say, for proselytizing for the hobby is to bring in fresh blood. I mean, when you think about it, there's basically 2 ways people get into hobbies, right? There's you research, you hear about a hobby, hearsay, and then you research it yourself, and then you choose to, delve in. But probably, I think the more common way people get into things is they have friends that are into it or acquaintances that are into it, and then the acquaintance or friend tells them about the hobby, and then they're like, oh, that sounds like something that I would want to do. So I just think it's kind of natural to proselytize for things you're passionate about and, convince or ask your friends if they'd be interested in maybe checking it out as well.
And I'm sort of used to the other end, and Keith, you can back me up. Usually when we're out in public, we just have people sort of looking at us like we're strangers. How does it usually make you feel?
I don't know. I mean, I guess they just kind of stare at you and you wonder if they're observing you or they're actually interested in playing. So then you kind of have to make the first move and say, hey, are you here for gaming? And about half the time they say no, and then you're like, okay, enjoy your meal or whatever.
Does that
But
ever work?
but then you follow up. Keith,
Yeah.
you follow up. You ask them while they're watching you. You ask them what they usually do if they played games in the past. I mean, I like to catch all types of people in the net, and at least, you know, there's plenty of outlets out there now, whereas if they don't feel comfortable doing something in public, they might go back and do it privately. And
do you ever have just random customers sit down and start playing games at Cafe Express?
Rarely,
but
it has happened.
It has happened before. Cause let's see, I'm trying to think of. Ironically, we've had it happen a few times with some of the older customers and some of the younger as well. And we've had occasionally one or two people just come back on their own, and they may or may not stay for a while.
No.
But I think, you know, it sort of leads into one of like the secondary benefits is that, you know, people when they go out and they're just eating at a restaurant, they're not expecting to see like a new social activities. And, you know, a lot of people don't really think of actual games as a social activity. It's more like a family activity where they're just constantly, it's like, oh God, I'm stuck with these people and we're playing Monopoly or something. And when they see, I would say when they see people who are actually getting together voluntarily and playing something that they don't know, they are interested, and you tell them, hey, you can easily join in by doing something as simple as most, you know, the vast majority of these games are available at a Target or Barnes & Noble or, you know, Amazon. 3 places where people are quite often.
Right. And so just to kind of round out that point, bringing Fresh Blood into the hobby I think is good for the overall hobby, because the more fans we have, the more customers we have, the more effort publishers will put into creating games and, you know, expanding their catalog of games and producing games. So it just having fans is essentially customers, and customers is what you need to grow any kind of industry. So I think bringing Fresh Blood in is a strong selling point for the pros for proselytizing. Next point, letting potential gamers know that such games exist. And what I mean by that is, even though board gaming has kind of blown up in the past few years, there are still people that I meet that have not heard of board gaming as a hobby. And I was heavily into video games, and I had never heard of like gamer board games, right? And so I was kind of brought into the hobby by friends who were just like, oh, hey, we have this game that we used to play in college a lot called Settlers of Catan. And I played it, and I was like, wow, this is a board game, but it's actually fun, you know? So, like, it just kind of blew my mind, and we still find those moments when we show people these games, because a lot of people still, their basis of board games is Monopoly, Life, Sorry. They think that, that's what comes to mind to them when they hear board games. And so we're trying to do our part to kind of change that, you know, cultural perception of board games.
But do you think that somehow makes us appear elitist? I mean, Keith, do you ever feel elite status over
Keith
people?
is an elitist, so he's a bad person to ask.
I don't know. When I first started playing board games in grad school, and I played with this group that had been playing for long before I started. And anyway, I played with them, and I got better and more acclimated to all the different games they played. And then when I was leaving, one of the guys gave me some advice, and he said, you know, because I said wherever I go, there probably not going to be another good board gaming group like this. And he's like, well, what you can do is you can just get people that are interested and play with them. And he said, at first it won't probably be enjoyable for you, but as you play with them and their skills develop, then over time there'll be people who are good you'll enjoy playing with. Mm-hmm. And I think that's true. Like when new people come in, it's like I feel it's like almost a chore to play board games with them sometimes. Like I'm like, okay, well, I guess today I'm not gonna have any fun because I'm gonna play games I don't really want to play that much with people who don't know how to play them. So it's not a good. But I mean, it's not a terrible thing to do. But it's like sometimes it's something. I kind of think of it as like, okay, I'm gonna spend a certain amount of my public board gaming time bringing new people in. It's just maintenance. You know, the other,
as we said, elitist. I mean, those of you on YouTube, just look at that mustache. Straight elitist.
Yeah. The other piece of advice he gave me is he said, don't be afraid to let other people, like, basically let other people win the game intentionally, which I have not done so far, but maybe I should have.
Yeah.
I don't know. That could be
I have
good.
mixed feelings about that.
No, man.
He's like, yeah, just let people win sometimes, and I'm like, nope, never gonna happen.
Yeah, I've never let anyone.
Yeah.
Well, I find there's two things you got to do when you're introducing new people in the game. Number one, occasionally share a little bit of good strategy with them, but do not coach them through the whole game. I mean, experienced board gamers would call this the pandemic effect, and there's a legion of people who don't like cooperative games because of it. And then the next thing is, you got to sort of, or that part of this is also you have to let them make their own mistakes at games.
Yeah.
And in addition, you just have to. I don't see it as maintenance. I see it as like, all right, I'm slowly going to make people just get better at maybe not this game, but other games they might like just because of systems. I mean,
sure. They need to feel like they have agency, so you don't want to coach them through every single move for sure. But definitely maybe give them some hints, especially if they're totally lost. Like some people who are not gamers, they're like deer in headlights the first time you play anything with any complexity with them, and then you can and they'll get it fast, but they just, sometimes they've never played anything like this, so you just kind of help them along a little bit. All right, next point, gaming has a lot of benefits. It's a social activity that you can, enjoy with friends that doesn't involve like sitting in a movie theater or watching Netflix together, so it's an interactive social activity, which is always helpful. Some games are educational, teach us about history. Definitely, I do a lot more mathematics now that I board game than I ever had to do before that. Just kind of like put your mind at work, and there's been studies that have shown benefits as far as like the effects of board games on the brain, so it could stave off things like dementia and Alzheimer's and things like that. So lots of intrinsic and extrinsic benefits overall.
And I think the thing that I notice at the places that we play is, especially in public, people are just amazed that we're all getting together and we're not like looking at a screen. They're like, these days everyone looks at, computer screens for hours in a day.
Phone screens.
Or phone screens for hours in a day. And, we have quite a few, well, most of the games are, you don't have to look at a screen at all.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there are the ones you do, but then those take hours as well. But anyways, another topic.
So, did y'all have any other points before we move on to the cons? I think we made some pretty strong cases.
No.
I'll just say that I'm kind of back to what we were talking about with teaching people games. I agree with like, you don't have to give people, you don't have to like throw the game, but I know some people who really just enjoy beating new players at games, and they don't like give them any strategy. So I think it's when I have no problem, like for me it's like I just want to play my best, and I have no problem helping other people play their best. Like I'm not trying to win, I just want to play the game correctly.
Right.
So I think giving people advice is in the first game, especially if it's complex, is like, I think it's a good thing, being forgiving, like when people make a mistake, say, hey, you can take that move back. If it's the first time they played a game, it's like I'm very, very, I try to just make it a fun game. I'm not trying to be super competitive. So
right.
Anyway, that's.
Good point. All right, so let's talk about some of the cons. So these are just some arguments that I've heard on Board Game Geek, reading various forum threads about it. But so one point that people make is that you shouldn't care whether or not other people are into your hobby. And I mean, that's kind of correct. Like, I don't really care that people are into my hobby, but as we pointed out, having more people in the hobby will improve the hobby, because more fans means more customers, and that means the publisher is going to put more effort into releasing products. So in that way, yes, I do care, but it's not like, oh, everybody has to be like me and love the things that I do. It's more like, hey, I want to grow the hobby so that our hobby grows,
Yeah.
So that's one thing. The next thing that's a really popular con is you shouldn't push the hobby onto people, and especially your own children. Like, people
gotta teach kids. You gotta teach them with force.
But some people have very visceral reactions when they're like, oh yeah, I play games with my kids, and like some people will blow up. They're like, no, you can't force your kids to like your hobbies, and it's like, and some people, which I think is a normal thing, especially in America, is like, oh yeah, we have family game night, and then some people are like, no, that's forcing your kids to play board games. Having a family game night, you're forcing it. It's like, okay, I mean, I see the point. You don't want to force your kids to do things they don't like, but how many? I've never played a game with a kid that did not enjoy playing games. Like, kids like games. That's part of being a kid. So
Yeah.
I think it's an overreaction.
You know, it's funny. I have a different experience. I don't have a kid of my own, but my sister is 16 years my junior, so I had a, you know, sort of a parental relationship with her a little bit, and you know, it's funny. I would play a lot of different games with her, both video and board games, and eventually, you know, she just sort of grew out of those. She went more into, well, she became a fashion designer and things of that nature, but she became a more well-rounded person because she will try a number of different games, and even more importantly, if you want to play a game, she'll just chill out and watch you play the game. So it does make you get a little bit of influence, but just don't, you can play with your kids, just don't expect them to literally pick up your hobby. They just might be tolerant of it because they love you.
Right. Yeah, I definitely wouldn't say force a kid that doesn't want to play games to play board games, but I just think it's not really forcing a kid to play if they're enjoying themselves, right?
Yeah.
So,
And kids will let you know
yeah.
if they don't like something.
Right.
At least every kid I've ever known. So.
Exactly. So yeah, definitely don't force them to play board games, but I mean, I think a family game night is a normal and healthy thing to have. You know, you have the family all around a table interacting with each other. Something I think a lot of families don't do enough of. So I think that's a great way to kind of engage everybody in the family into something that's fun, is having a family game night.
Well, do you think, like, sometimes, well, not just with kids, but like if your whole family, do you ever feel like they just feel like they have to play with you because you're the lonely one? Or?
Yeah, well, my whole family, for the most part, loves games, except for my parents. Funnily enough, neither my dad or my mom ever play games. So, like, getting them to play games with us is like pulling teeth. Whereas, like, you know, my aunts, uncles, cousins, brothers, sisters, they're all about it. And then just my parents, both of them, just do not like games. So, but the funny thing is, when you actually get them to play games, they enjoy themselves and they laugh and they have fun. So, you know.
Maybe they just like the quiet time without you kids.
that could be it.
What about you, Keith? How does your family feel?
They like games pretty well. Actually, I used to go to my cousins for Thanksgiving, and they would always ask me, like, if I brought games. So games like I'd play with them would be like Dixit or Werewolf or just very light, casual games that are, where you can talk during the game a lot, and you're not really focused on strategy. But yeah, there were a couple people, like my dad. Like you'd ask me to play a game, and he's like, I don't feel like it. Or my brother is kind of the same way, but then you start playing a game, and then they join in, and then they don't want to stop. So it's kind of like, it's almost like getting into a hot tub or something. You know?
You're the game box.
Yeah.
It's like people can stop by Kroger on Thanksgiving, and then there you are with the games.
But,
yeah, it's just, and part of it's just kind of reading social cues. Much like kids, I wouldn't push gaming onto anyone, friends, family, whoever. If they're not into it, they're not into it, and that's fine. So I would say just don't like push on people that don't want to play. But if like they're curious in the least, sure, show them a game. Like, why wouldn't I don't see a reason why you wouldn't. So just don't make them feel obligated, I guess, is the point. But if they seem genuinely interested, then have them try out one of your new games. Other things, and this is going back to like an elitist type of attitude. Some people say, we don't want all these non-gamers in the hobbies because they will only want to play gateway games or like Munchkin and things like that. They'll never want to play real games, and then it's just like the convention is more filled with this type of gamer that doesn't really play the heavier games. And they're at the meetups, they're doing everything. So I have mixed feeling on that because I do see that point. Like my game days on Sunday, I specifically say we don't play party games here. We play strategy games because I play party games at parties and with my family. So I get plenty of party games in my life. So I designated the game days that I host as like, hey, this is the time to play heavy strategy games because I don't really have a chance to play them in any other setting. Whereas party games, you can play them anytime.
And, well, at the public meetup, what do you think? What do you think our party policy is, Keith? I'd say.
I mean, I think usually we play later. It's like the end, and then we can go outside and play when it cools off. And I mean, sometimes people start playing party games because we play for like about 5 hours. They'll just play right at the start, and it's like, hey, go over there and get your friends and play. But as long as there's like a core group of like serious gamers, I think it's okay. Like, I mean, I don't really care what other people are doing.
Yeah.
Although I do think it's like a valid concern that if you dilute the player base with like lots of casual gamers, I have seen that in like lots of different areas where like, you know, something becomes popular and it becomes like it basically gets dumbed down. And I mean, ideally you would still have like complex games and serious games, but I've seen it in other areas, you know, and it doesn't always work out that way because there's limited resources to development. So yeah, but on the other hand, I don't think people that are casual gamers are really going to be buying that many games. So, you know,
I'm probably a bad person to ask because I'm kind of bad about this. I remember at Cafe Express there were these people that came. They were super excited to play Munchkin because they're like Munchkin's their favorite game, and I'm like, oh, Munchkin.
These people still come.
yeah.
I'm like, that's great, but I have this game called Codenames, and if you like Munchkin, I think you like it. It's simple, it's fast, you know, and sure enough, I showed them Codenames, and they loved it, but I think some people would take umbrage with my approach, because I basically kind of pushed them to play Codenames when they were super excited to play Munchkin, and the way I justified it was, I hate Munchkin. It can take over an hour, 2 hours, and I would have been miserable the whole time, and, you know, my thought process was like, well, I can show them a shorter game, and they could still play Munchkin afterwards, but, you know, I can go play something else. But we were all sitting at a table, and they wanted to play a game right then, and then I was like, well, I don't really want to play Munchkin, but we can play Codenames, and then, you know, y'all can play Munchkin, or we can try another game, or whatever.
Did you show them this disdain? I mean, do you feel like Munchkin players aren't true gamers, Trey?
I
mean, are you being a purist again?
Yeah, I was a little bit elitist, and, you know, I take responsibility for that, but I think the result was good because I showed them Codenames, and they really enjoyed it, and they had never heard of Codenames before, so, you know, I feel like I did show them a game that they ended up liking, so... You know, I'm not against people playing Munchkin, and, you know, I think we should have gamers of all types, including casual gamers, and I don't mind if population blooms because of casual gamers, that's fine. A lot of casual games are good. I just don't think Munchkin's one of them, but, you know,
Look,
that's a matter of taste.
How we've handled this at the public meetups is, please, we encourage you to bring your games, but if you have to read from the rule book, like while you're explaining the game, you haven't done enough preparation to play your game. So we will defer you until you've had a chance to read your rule book. That's and true. Go on and come up with something, you know, a little bit more concise in your presentation. I mean, admittedly, everyone should have a rule book available, especially when we play a number of games for the first time they've been played on the first week they've been out. Which is something that we do. You know, rule books might be necessary, multiple people should read them, but, you know, on a game that's sort of like been out there for years or no one's ever heard of and it's been out for 15 plus years, I expect you to have that sort of settled and cold.
Yeah, I kind of feel like playing a game where you have to read the rule book is like a privilege you have to earn. You know, it's like, if you play with people enough and then you're like, okay, I played a lot with these people, I know them, and then they're like, hey, a new game just came out, or I just got this game I want to play. And even, like, usually you still expect them to have watched a YouTube video about the rules, read through the rule book at least once on their own. And it's like, you're probably still going to have to kind of go through the rules because you won't remember setup or something like that. And I think, but it's like, in that situation, it's like I kind of feel like I have to have already invested in a relationship with that person before I'm willing to spend the time to play a game with them, because it can be really bad.
The point there is just make sure you know how to play your game if you're going to try to get other people to play it.
Right.
Let's have some closing thoughts on proselytizing. Charles?
I believe you should do it. Get out there, speak to the masses. If they see you, be a good example. Go for it in the team. Try to see if they'll come in. Give them the dates. You'll be there. See if they'll come back. You know, I like to be, you know, basically, I want to be a billboard. You see me every day passing through your traffic route, whatever road you take, and if you see me enough times, you might even just stop by the restaurant or give a call or look it up on the internet or go to one of the places I've been telling you to, and you know, hopefully you'll join in, and the more the merrier.
So Charles is very pro proselytizing. Keith, what do you think?
I have a friend like Charles, so you don't have to do the work.
Right. So Keith is pro proselytizing, but he doesn't want to do it. I'm kind of in the same boat as Keith. I don't particularly enjoy proselytizing, but I think it's a great thing for the hobby, so I strongly encourage it. With the caveat is that you shouldn't push people to do things they don't want to do. But as long as you're doing it with the goal of like being social, doing something with them, you're not like pushing drugs or anything. You're pushing a hobby, so don't strong arm them into enjoying something you enjoy, because they might not enjoy the things that you enjoy, and that's fine. All right, let's get to our top 3 gateway games, things that we want to pull out when we're bringing gamers in. I know we all made our lists separately, so we all had different kind of methods. In my list, I didn't put party games like Codenames and Resistance, because those can be used in any setting, even when I'm not trying to bring a gamer into the hobby. Like, you can just play those with family and whatever. And it's not necessarily converting people into the hobby, because these are games that are just like family party games. But I think they put some party games on their list, so that's fine. But we just had different methods. So let's start with number 3. My number 3 is Star Realms. And I put Star Realms because it's a conflict game, and most conflict games are pretty complex. You think of things like Risk, I guess that's the second simplest, but that's like a 3-hour game. Not really a gateway game, and a game that people are already familiar with, and most of them already hate. So I think
They've
Star
never
Realms...
played the right rules.
Right. I think Star Realms is a great intro into conflict games, and it's very short. An alternative would be Hero Realms if they're more into fantasy, but these games are super easy, and you're also kind of getting them into deck building. So it's both introducing them to conflict hobby games, but also introducing them into a commonly used mechanic in the hobby, which is deck building. Keith, what's your number 3?
I'd say Codenames, I guess.
Yeah.
It's my number 3 game. I think it's important to have people have a good experience when they try board game, because a lot of people haven't played with that group before, or they haven't played board games really before. So I try to find, I think it's like you want to play a couple short, simple games so they have a good experience. And then even if later in the gaming session they play like something more serious and they don't have as much fun, at least they're like, well, I played like 2 or 3 different games, and I had fun in at least 2 of them. I just want them to have. To me, it's more about giving them a good experience than really getting them interested. And I feel like, those games you can like socialize, and I think a lot of people get into board games because they like socializing to a certain extent.
And Codenames is probably a 95% success rate on them having an enjoyable experience.
Right,
So yeah,
right.
I do think that's a good game. Charles?
I would probably, my criteria were a little bit different. I sort of wanted games where if I was playing a serious game, then I could get to other people who were all new, and then they can sort of teach themselves from scratch with minimum input from me. And just clarification. So my number 3 was Parade, which has a few things going for it. One, it's an Alice in Wonderland themed game. And that instantly breaks in a lot of people. Number 2, you have sort of a line of cards, and you're just doing basic math to figure out what you're taking. So if they can count, and then they can look at colors and numbers, and it's also friendly to the colorblind because each color has a distinctive shape, then you're good to go. And definitely it also helps that it can play 3 to 6 players with equal comfort and ease. So.
Yeah. And then, all right, very good. My number 2 is Hanabi, which I chose as my intro to co-op games.
Conflict games.
And conflict game. Yeah, it is. It brings about a lot of conflict, but I think it's just an interesting experience that kind of blows people's minds if they've never played a co-op game, especially if they're not into hobby board games at all. They're like, I've never played anything like this, because it's kind of like a neat gimmick of sorts, and it's a co-op game, and a lot of people have never played any co-op games, period. So I think it's more fun than something like Pandemic, because it also gets around the alpha player syndrome of like the best person at the table, or at least the best person in their own mind, telling everyone else what to do in the game, which is a huge problem in a lot of co-op games. Hanabi circumvents that by just saying you can't really communicate that much with your partners. And an alternative to that would be Shh, which is SHH. It's one of those Paco games. It's like a small word game. It's my favorite word game by far, and it just comes in looks like a pack of gum, and it's basically a game where it's a co-op game where you're building words together, and it's really fascinating, but you can't talk at all. So it's
Defeats the point. But
Yeah.
not in my opinion, but
okay.
yeah. So Keith,
I'd say my second is Skull. It's up to 6 players. You can play it relatively quickly. It's pretty easy to explain the rules, and I think the main thing I like about that game for new players is I think people feel like they're good at the game before they're finished their first play. So it's like people can feel like they're like, I'm super good at reading what people are going to put down if they're going to put down a skull or a flower. This is basically like you're trying to guess what card other people put face down and you bid based on that. So I think I think that's a good game because I think a lot of people when they feel like they mastered a game, they enjoy it more, and I think people can feel like at least they're competent in that game really quickly, whereas that can't be said for a lot of other games.
it's a great push your luck system. Charles?
My number 2 game was Splendor, and definitely don't shake your head. From my qualifications, for people who've played Splendor a lot, and we all played it a lot, it develops a certain level of hate after a while. But for people who are new to the hobby, you can pull out Splendor, especially if you're not carrying it in the box. I've compressed my Splendor down to about the size of this microphone. You put it in front of people. It has nice tactile poker chips. You explain that there's only 4 things they can do, and you tell them they're going to 15 points. You tell them how to do it, and basically you can have them playing Splendor in about 3 to 4 minutes. Just remember to let them know they can't have more than 10 chips. And most people, brand new, old, never played, old, young, get it. They understand it fast, and they'll actually be able to play like a 30 to 40 minute game of Splendor, which is way too long for normal people, but for a new person coming into the hobby, it's sort of like a perfect weight, and they feel like it's a heavy game.
I will say I did enjoy my first play of Splendor, and then it was all downhill from there. So I'm gonna put for my number 1 a gateway game that has only gone up in my opinion every time I've played it, which is King Domino, which is a new release. It's very simple, just like Splendor, easy to teach, just like Splendor, pops on the table, just like Splendor, has a nice tactile feel to it. But that game just becomes more interesting the more I play it. Just like trying different strategies, and I just think the mechanics are more intriguing. So that would be my number 1 is King Domino. Another oldie but goodie that would probably be here if not for King Domino would be For Sale, which is and also kind of the same category of game, gateway game. But so if you want like a light strategy game, I would definitely recommend King Domino or For Sale. Keith?
I'd say mine. I don't know. There's a lot of games that you could choose from, but I think I'll just go with Medici because I've been playing it for basically since I started board gaming for a long time, and it's like very easy to teach. It's up to 6 players. I think an important thing is like games that accommodate a large number of players, so it does do up to 6. It's pretty easy to teach. People usually feel like they can kind of grasp the system to a certain extent, although choosing their bids can be a bit of a challenge until they played the game a few times. But people generally have a fun time, and it's not too long of a game. But I'd say it's a little more of a heavier game than my other ones. So I think it's important. It's like a good gateway game for people that feel like they're getting some meat, but it's you can get up and running pretty fast.
And my number 1 game, is Red 7. It's very simple, 7 colors, cards numbered 1 through 7, and basically I think you can teach it a base level Red 7 very fast. People can get to play it, and you can tell them it's like, if you feel like this is too simple, let me know. I'll add more rules, and that's basically how Red 7 works. And they get more and more complicated or complex as they want to, and you don't have to teach them scoring or any of that nature. And I think it works really good. It teaches them sort of tableau management, hand management, all at once, and it sets good foundations for the future, more complicated games I'll be teaching in the future.
I agree. Red 7 just missed my list, and honestly, I just didn't think of it. It might have been there, but yeah, it's the only one I disagreed with in all of these lists is Splendor, but that's just because I think King Domino is better. And I do think Splendor does a good job of bringing gateway players in, which is what this list is about. I hate it the more I play it. We'll now start our discussion of Terraforming Mars. Terraforming Mars, great game or great experience or both or neither. So that is what we can lead off our discussion is. Do we think it's a great game or just a great experience?
I think
Or
it's
both.
I think it's a good experience. I don't really think it's a balanced game. I mean, Charles and I have talked about this a lot, and it's like the corporation you start with it basically determines how well you're going to do in the game. Like, some are just much better than others. Some also, like, there's also a lot of randomness, and so, like, to me, I almost play it like a single player game, I think. I mean, I don't play it as a single player game, but it's like I'm just focused on what I'm doing more than anything. Like, I'm looking at all these cards, trying to figure out how I'm going to put them together and form a strategy with them. So to me, it's almost like a challenge. You're faced with like this new problem every time you play the game. You're like, I have some random set of cards. How can I optimize it? And it's kind of like Agricola when you're first drafting your cards or looking at your first 7 cards, trying to figure out like how I'm going to use these during the course of the game. And I think that's basically the enjoyment I get out of Terraforming Mars.
Yeah, I do think it's a good game, and it's a great experience. It's one of my favorite games that has come out in the past few years, and I love playing it, but it does have some design problems. Balance, as Keith already mentioned, both the corporations, and I don't think the cards are particularly balanced.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's like 300 cards, so you can't really expect them to be balanced. So I understand why there's that variance. The drafting helps. I definitely would not play the game without the draft, and I actually had a nice little debate with the designer on the game on the BGG forums about that, and he defended playing without the draft by basically saying he enjoys the randomness and the swinginess. So, those of you who think the game is not random and swingy, the designer himself admitted it in this debate. But he enjoys that, and for me, I just prefer more control. So I would always opt to play with the draft. But if you don't mind random swings of luck in your game, then yeah, sure, play without the draft. But to me, that just kind of makes the experience worse.
Yeah, I've played without the first couple games. I played without drafting, and I didn't enjoy the game at all. And then when we started drafting, it got a lot better for me.
This might come as a little off the deep end, but Terraforming Mars is like a marriage. It's one of the games that is sort of like a significant other in your life, and for better or worse, you couldn't imagine being without it, and you think you might play with it for the rest of your life. I have 2 other games that fall in this category. They are Terra Mystica and Through the Ages. I just feel like I will be with these games for the rest of my life. They're very deep, involved games, and I never seem to get enough of them. And I learn something new about them every time, and there's a lot of different strategies and very reactive ways to go through the game. So I do think it is both a great game and a great experience with a ton of flaws, and I would love to fix them by putting them in a gym.
Yeah. It's
So-
I think that's a good way to characterize it. So one thing I wanted to mention is, what do y'all think about the inclusion of the Take That cards? Because it seems like a weird game to put Take That cards in, and there's not that many of them, and they don't really affect the game that much. So it's like, why even bother putting Take That cards in?
Honestly, I really hate that part of the game. I don't know. It's like things are going. You have kind of this plan, and then somebody just randomly blows up all your plans, or they
blow up all your plans again,
or it's like, or you just, or you just like, which Charles does me every single time. It's like he somehow always gets like that
commercial district,
or
urbanized area,
or and it's like I'm building my perfect little like triangle city zone where I can put the 4 greenery tiles in the middle, and he's like, boop. And like this cost me like 3 points, and he got. It's like I don't know.
3 points.
Out of all the hundreds of cards, he always seems to like draw that. Like the turn, it's like the end of one turn. I'm like, okay, the first move on my next turn is putting greenery tile there because I have the money, and he's like, he just puts his thing there.
And even those cards are swinging. Like there's some that like just kind of chip away at you, and they're just a minor annoyance. And then there's some that's like, oh, I steal a titanium production, which is a huge swing in that game. So it's like, what?
Yeah.
Like, what is this card? Why is this card in the game?
Right, and I think part of the idea behind the Take That cards is like, well, if somebody is like, it's a 4-player game or 5-player or 3-player game, whatever. If somebody's kind of like got a kind of an advantage in cards and they're doing really well, then you can kind of use those cards to like slow them down a little bit. But there's so many different attack cards.
Yeah.
It's like often the person in the lead can't even be attacked with the card. It's like, if you're gonna blow up plants, they're not even building. They don't have any plants, so it's like, well, that's useless.
Then you have to attack the person who's already losing that builds plants.
Right. So it's like, it's just almost like act of God randomness you know, and it's like a lot of those cards are not really that good.
Yeah.
So it's like when you play with new players, that's another kind of annoying thing because sometimes they'll play those cards and it's like, well, they hurt you, but they're gonna end up losing anyway, and it's,
Right.
yeah, it's just
They wasted more money than the card. Like people playing in suboptimally in a number of games, especially in Terraforming Mars, really sort of hurts just one player, and it might not necessarily be the leader.
right.
Sort of like what you were sort of going within the attacks. And it's funny, I went through all the cards, and not a single attack card even made the top 20 of cards, and hell, not even a single event. And most of the
Yeah.
events have these attacks in them.
In any game that has attacks like this, if it's not meant to be a war game, which you expect, like beat down the leader type stuff, but in a strategy game, a multiplayer strategy game, any attack on someone else is by definition going to help the other players.
Right.
So it's like if it's a 2-player game, that's fine. You're just beating down one person. You're beating down each other. Who cares? But in a 3-player game or a 4-player game, it's like I attack you, and then the other people who are not involved in this conflict just got a boon. I invested resources in attacking you. I got maybe a small bonus from that, and you got hurt, and then everyone else is just sitting on the sideline laughing, and it helped them.
Right.
And, you know, the attacks ultimately sort of unbalance just one particular small area of the game, but you could say, like, the entire game from the start has some interesting balance issues. And the first part, the easiest place to see that is just in the corporations themselves. Do either of you think the corporations are balanced?
No.
No, they're not. No.
Honestly, like if I were to make an addendum to the game, I would say like you should get like a certain amount of victory points at the end of the game based on your starting corporation and the number
Like
of
Terra
rounds.
Mystica has balanced its races.
Yeah, 'cause
On
it's
the-
just
No,
like-
it has not.
on the app it has.
But like Fog Log
On the
is
official app it
terrible.
has.
Oh, with the with the
Darklings
points?
start at like way lower points than everyone else.
Okay.
So they did balance it.
Yeah, that definitely needs to happen. And the corporations too. A lot of them like depend on the cards you get. Some are really good, like the Mining Guild. If you get like lots of tiles that let you cover up resource spots to raise your steel production, it's super good. But if you don't, I played them 3 times and like failed pretty hard twice because I didn't get good starting cards. And the third time, I got my highest score ever. So
I would definitely say the corporations themselves sort of fall into 3 tiers. You know, if you have like if you want to do the classic A to F grading system, I don't feel like there's an S tier corporation in this game, one that wins every time, regardless of setup. There are a number of A tier corporations, however. Most of those, literally, if you want to figure out how to rate the corporations in this game, just see how much starting capital they actually begin with,
Right.
and then just go down the list, and you'll pretty much find that you are, you know, of the 13 corporations, that's where you're going to be. The corporations that start with above like 60 to 70 effective starting capital are going to be in like your top half. That includes the beginner corporation, which starts with, you know, the equivalent of $72, and
Right.
Yeah.
you know, everything else from there sort of works its way down. The corporations that start with very little actual physical capital are going to just be terrible. Even, you know, we have a big debate about Foblog all the time.
yeah, I think that's the worst starting corporation.
Mainly because
$23.
$23 is
Yeah, it's nothing.
7 cards.
It's like, okay, you started with that corporation, you buy, like, even buying only 3 out of your 10 cards is like, it's
you
like,
do
okay,
nothing the first couple of rounds.
it's like, cool, you have $14 to spend, and it's like, I mean, you do have titanium, but titanium, I think, is like one of the least useful early game resources.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, there's space cards, there's good space cards, but I think,
Those
other
are more
card-
late game for the most
right,
part.
I think
yeah.
the other cards are just better, you know? I mean, it's like, well, I can spend $4 credits to get steel production for one of the cards, so that pays us. I mean, you have to look at how soon you're recouping your costs, right? And I think they just don't recoup their costs fast enough on any of the titanium,
Well,
or any of the space cards.
Was there a couple of specific cards you wanted to bring up before we wrap up?
I mean, one thing that I wanted to go through actually at the end was like what we felt were the 10 best cards in Terraforming Mars. We went through all 300 of these cards, and we got a few of them that, for various reasons, we thought were extremely good, and off the bat, it's all over the place in terms of good starting cards and good mid game cards. But
Well,
for the most
like,
part,
I
these
see
are
3 mines.
our starting cards, and yeah, we went a little bit heavy on the builder tag, but the number ones are the mining rights. There's the mining rights and the mining area.
Yeah, two best.
Just simply the 2 best cards in the game, even if you get them, in round 3 or 4. If you start out in round 1, I mean, they cost 9 and 4 respectively. They let you place a tile on the board. The earlier you get them, the more they'll pay off. At minimum, if you cover like a steel site, you're going to make $20 off the steel in round 1, or even if not, it only costs you $12 if you bought it initially. So you're just minting money at that point.
Right. And if you start off with like the mining guild or something that starts with steel or titanium, it's like you just spend that and play the card. So it's
Right.
awesome.
I definitely think the theme here is if you get a ninja building card early, then you're golden. But that's a big if, especially if you play without drafting. So, and even if you play with drafting, there's no guarantee you'll get one of these 10 cards.
Right.
Electro Catapult is probably my favorite card. Turn a plant or a steel into $7. Wow, that's great. And you can use that every round. Immigrant City, Super Cheap City, Protected Habitats. Basically negate all the attack cards in the game, which is super helpful.
Which is super helpful in this game, especially.
Not all the attack cards, but most of them, because they mostly attack through plants.
And then there's just some broken cards. Radchem Factory is you lose an energy production to gain 2 terraform rating for the rest of the game.
Which is 2 points and $2 every round. Yeah,
it's just
that's crazy.
Crazy broken. I'm like, why does this card even exist in the game?
The fact that you can buy it with steel makes it really good.
Yeah. And 4 heat production as well is pretty crazy for $20, especially if you get that going early. I mean, you're getting half a temperature raise every round, so pretty great.
Yeah, I think a lot of the cards depend on your starting corporation too. Like some are better than that. Like if you
have the heat corporation and you get this card, it's like, all right, I'm good.
And one of the more underrated cards that we found you really need to do if you're going to try to consistently score like over 90 points. Keith even scored 100 in one game, is like standard projects. At some point you're just not going to draw the cards that you need, and just going off the rails and using the standard projects does actually become a viable strategy, especially if you really need a greenie or really need a city, or you might need some energy at some point.
And it has a science tag
and it has
on
a science tag,
which is hard to get. This is a cheap science tag, one of the cheapest in the deck.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I think,
go ahead.
No, I think there's kind of like different. You have to actually change your strategy a lot depending on the corporation you have. Like some corporations, if you have like a lot of titanium or steel production, then you can actually draft cards throughout the entire game and play them because you have basically these resources that are going to go to waste otherwise. But I think for a lot of corporations, if you never have steel or titanium production, there's like a point in the game between, it depends on how many players you have, but like the game, I think our 4-player games usually go between 9 to 11 rounds. And typically end around 10, and then like 5. I mean, 5 usually end at 8 or 9, and then 3 goes to like 10 or 11 usually. And I think if you don't have those resource production like steel or titanium, then you have to like, I'd say about halfway through the game, round 5 or generation 4 or 5 or 6, it's like you just stop drafting cards unless they're super good, and you just start buying standard projects. You like put down greenery tiles on the board, buy some cities so you can score greenery tiles. And I think that's a mistake that a lot of new players make, or even people that haven't played a ton, is they end the game with like a handful of cards that they bought, and it's like, well, if you have like 5 cards, that's $15.
Yeah.
And it's almost enough. Or if you have 6 cards, that's like 18. And anyway, you're pretty close to buying another greenery tile, which could be 2 or 3 points,
exactly,
or 4 points even. So
choosing which cards to buy is extremely important.
Yeah, and I think one card that I put here was Research Outpost. There's, I believe, 2 or 3 cards in the game that gives you a discount off of every card played.
Yeah.
Research, both of them are good. The other one I think costs 23 and it's worth 2 victory points. Research Outpost gives you 1 discount off every card. It's a science tag, and it lets you put down a city. It's
Crazy.
It's just a crazy good card.
It's crazy.
Yeah, we found a couple cards that are just straight up broken.
Yeah.
Insulation
Oh,
is
yeah.
another extremely broken card.
Yeah, never fund the banker award, because if somebody's playing Helion and they have that card, they're just going to be like, boop, I just got 15 extra income and I'm going to steal that award from you.
Well, we are running out of time, though. Let's get to your final thoughts on Terraforming Mars, Charles.
I think Terraforming Mars. Its expansion comes out in the middle of July. I'm hoping it'll become even better. As is, I think it's a very unbalanced game, and I would spend a lot of time I hope the designer is spending a lot of time trying to come up with an edition that ultimately balances out the corporations, which I think will make it even better.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I really enjoy playing the game. It's like the theme really is strong, and I think to me it's like it's almost like a real simulation game, and to me that's where I get most of my enjoyment. But it's like I kind of have just come to accept the fact that the winner is like just going to be whoever happened to get a little bit lucky with cards. It's like, you try to play the best you can, but it's like at the end of the game it's like, well, you started with Credit Core and I started with Foblog, so Credit Core is going to beat me by 15 points or whatever. Like, there's just nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
So yeah. I would just say don't try to win the. I just don't try to win the game. I look at the end of the game score and I'm like, well, I went 10 rounds. It was 4 players, and I had this corporation. That's a pretty good score. So
yeah. Well, and I think we would all agree that despite all of its negatives, it is a super interesting and fun game to play. So thank you, Keith, for joining us on this episode and this discussion. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We're on YouTube and Twitter at Eternally Bored, and our website is www.eternallybored.com. Until next time,
we're eternally bored, so you don't have to be.
Thanks.